Welcome to the Johnny Dell Football Academy podcast on the channel that's trying to answer the whys and hows of the game by talking through and dissecting game film and diving deeper to explain why the X's zig and the O's zag. I am Adam Marino, joined by Mr. Johnny Dell, and we are reminding you, as always, the most fun way to watch is on YouTube, where we go live. There you can comment into the live show. Be sure to hit the notification bell and turn on your notifications so you can be a part of the conversation. We also stream live on Facebook and X. Also, the audio versions are always found on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, if you are live with us in the chat, it's probably because you are subscribed, you've hit the notification bell, and turned those notifications on. So, when sharing with your friends, be sure to let them know. We also love to hear from you outside of our live show. Email us at jonnydelsfootballacademy@gmail.com, and you can always check out the website JFA49.com, as it is the most fun way to support the channel. Also, the way we boost the chat and boost the algorithm is to type out hashtag JD49. We are 7 days away from my birthday, Johnny. Isn't that why we were coming on today? Just to let people know, just a quick show, quick 5-minute show, right?
Yep, happy birthday. Okay, show's over. No.
Oh,
But happy birthday, Adam.
Next
But
week.
Happy birthday.
Next week. I'm giving people notice. A week from today. So a lot to get through. Niners offseason.
Jim Cushman gets it. I'm just gonna say Jim Cushman gets it.
Yes. So let's start there, because the world doesn't know what we know. We've talked on the show about that facility and all that. And I saw it's making national news now that they were looking into it. Like, can we just say that that's already been there?
Now I haven't seen it, but supposedly it even came up on the Joe Rogan show.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact is the 49ers have been the most injured team in the NFL for over the last 9 years. When you look at the totality of the last 9 years, they have been the most injured. I talked about it on the show Thursday with stats, and we've talked about it a couple times, but I'm going to keep saying it because, well, it bears repeating. And the information is, I every single day I'm getting people responding to my posts on X with the same stuff that I feel like I've said 30 times. I feel like I need to pin everything or just set AI, like tell Grok have an automatic reply when people say this stuff, because here's the things I keep hearing.
Yeah.
Keep seeing people respond. The 49ers have already cleared house 3 times. What more can they do? Had somebody respond with that yesterday. Had somebody respond with that the day before. Had somebody respond with that 3 days ago. You know, John Lynch came out in their end of year presser, and I was actually encouraged because Matt Mayoko was the first one to ask a question in the end of the year presser, and he asked about the injury situation and were they gonna look into anything with making changes. What irritates me is the way that Matt phrased that question was clearly trying to not get aggressive towards the training staff. And it again just reinforces to me that most of our beat reporters have some sort of source in the training staff that they are trying to protect. They're not pushing the issue too hard, because the only breaking news that our beat reporters ever get about the 49ers is on injury updates. Like they will sometimes be able to report this guy has this before it gets to the national media. Sometimes that tells me that there's people in that division that those are your sources. But he asked about it, and Lynch gave the most BS politician answer, where he's handing you a glass of pee and telling you it's peach tea, because he literally said, well, we've spent a lot of time and incredible effort bringing in some of the best people in the world, some extremely knowledgeable people, and we are always at the forefront of injury prevention. Really? You're going to try and sell me a line that your team is at the forefront of injury prevention when you have been the most injured team in the NFL? I'm sorry. I don't buy it. I don't buy that you spent this incredible amount of time bringing in the best and brightest when you have been giving internal promotion since 2019. I don't buy it. Like I no, actually, the guy who's your player head of player health and development has been with the team for 9 years. I don't buy that any of this stuff. And what frustrated me more was that it was asked, he answered that, and it was like everybody in the room went, "Oh, okay," and they moved on and didn't ask another question until they got to the substation, the electrical substation, and
Right.
asked about that. And Lynch was like, well, of course, if anything has to do with our player health, we're going to look into it. He has to say that for liability reasons, because if they said they hadn't looked into it, and then their players would start suing, or the NFLPA would sue. And he's like, but he adds on, if anybody can point me to a study that would show that right or wrong, well, have you looked into it or have you not? Because if you looked into it, you would know whether there's a study out there or not. Anyway, I've never blamed the EMF substation that's there. I just don't think there's any real data on it. But there is, the 49ers have a much, much higher rate of soft tissue injuries than the rest of the league. When you see a certain area that is, because, then Lynch, or not Lynch, what drives me nuts in this is that Shanahan always gets really defensive over this stuff. Because when he was asked about that, or talked about different players getting playing time, he's like, oh, well, maybe we should tell Ricky not to land on his knee wrong, and he lands on his knee wrong, and then that really derails his whole season, and maybe he just shouldn't land on his knee wrong. Well, these things can't be prevented, because Lynch said, injuries are part of football. Okay, we get that. I don't think there's any.
But we lead the league though. So
Yeah,
like
I don't think there's any fan that's sitting there saying you shouldn't have any injuries. That's not the argument here. The argument is that there's 31 other teams that are playing
that
a
have less.
game that has lots of injuries, and they have less. You have low. You can't say, well, it's because we play a physical game, and guys, when maybe we should just not have guys hit each other. You're not getting a lot of injuries off of contact injuries. You're getting an incredible amount of soft tissue. It's from non-contact injuries. It's Renardo Green pulling his hamstring in individual drills, not even position wide
Yeah.
receivers
Jacob Cowing,
on things. Jacob Cowing pulling his hamstring so many times throughout the year that he is
Kittle.
out the entire season to a hamstring injury. Ricky Pearsall misses the first 5 days of training camp because he pulls a hammy in OTAs, and it was apparently just being held up for precaution, but then took 6 weeks to come back and was eased back in during practice and missed the installs of training camp. Jordan Watkins got hurt, took 3 weeks to rehab his conditioning from his ankle sprain, is what they said, not the knee. That then he lost the valuable time in training camp to show that he could be higher on the depth chart than Demarcus Robinson, who was terrible most of the year. And I go, okay, you are having an incredible amount of soft tissue injuries. Connor Colby was uh, had missed almost no time in college because of injuries. The first week he was in the starting in the number one reps for during practice, he pulled a groin. Tatum Bethune tore his groin in week 18. You have a high rate of ACL tears. You have a high rate of Achilles. Dre Greenlaw tore his Achilles jogging out onto the field in the Super Bowl. You can't tell me that there is not an underlying injury that is already there, that there's some sort of that doesn't just happen. Achilles don't just snap randomly. They're like there had to be underlying micro tears or something that led up to that. There's some sort of improper rehabilitation or rest and recovery with the team. Like there is just something wrong there. Dustin Perry has been there since 2017. He is the head of play. He is the vice president of player health and development. He oversees their entire program and is supposed to be the one putting together a cohesive plan from nutrition to strength and conditioning to training to team doctors. He coordinates everybody, and he is the one that is putting in place the protocols and the way that they go about everything. And he also understand he is married to Matt LaFleur's first cousin. So
Twice removed.
no, not even twice removed. Like Matt LaFleur's first cousin, he's married to her. And he worked with John Lynch in Denver. So he was an assistant with the strength and conditioning coach or staff in Denver when John Lynch was there. So this guy's got personal connections to these guys. That is why they don't want to move on, and they believe in him, and he's got their ear. He's got everything. They believe in him. And so I don't think things are going to change, and they seem unwilling, and they seem to be only ever defending him. It's insanity to me that you can have the Saints were the 32nd worst injured team, meaning they were the worst team for injuries in the league in 2024. They fired their head of strength and conditioning, their head of player health when Kellen Moore came in, because Kellen Moore came from the Eagles, where we just saw the Eagles in the wild card round had 21 of 22 starters playing. Okay, the Eagles have been largely healthy for like 6 years, 10 years. They seem to always be healthy. That was our frustration, right? Is that we're like, how do the Eagles never have these kind of injuries? It's just wild. It's not luck. After you see that there are certain programs that tend to have all of their guys really healthy, just go back and watch Vish Kumar. And 3 years ago, 4 years ago, he had Jaquiski Tart on as an interview, and Tart had gone to the Eagles. And he said, when I was with the 49ers, I thought they took really good care of our bodies. And then I got to Philadelphia and I realized it wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. And he talked about how much better the team took care of the players' bodies in Philadelphia than they did San Francisco. I blew it off at the time. 4 years later, we're sitting here and saying, no, Philadelphia is still one of the most healthy teams in the league, and the 49ers are one of the worst. That tells you there is a systemic problem with how they take care of their player health. And that starts at the top. And that guy has been given internal promotions, and it just is what it is. Okay. So
Frustrating.
it's beyond frustrating.
So, a quick reminder. I want to give a couple of quick reminders before we shift into the trenches, and I'm excited to get into that. But a reminder, guys, that next week Johnny will be at the Senior Bowl, so stay tuned for some nighttime, little quick info on different players that he likes. He always falls in love with 4 or 5 players. We may get one of them, and then we stress about the 4 that we didn't get. It happens every year. But no show on Monday morning, and stay tuned. This is why you hit the notification bell. So, quick reminder, if you have not hit the notification bell and you are live with us, make sure you hit that, because next week of all weeks is the week to do that. So, because Johnny might say, and even without me, I might not be available, whatever, we'll go live real quick to go over a couple news and notes from the Senior Bowl. Reminder also to take your phone, show it to people wearing Niners gear, show them the channel. All right, let's get into the trenches, the topic of the day. And the chat earlier, when we first got into it, was like, where can't we improve? Like, good Lord, Pooney needs competition. We need center. We need defensive
Yeah.
line. Just
Now we I think we have to temper everything with that. We're coming off of the ugliest loss of the year by a mile. So when you come off a really, really ugly loss, everything looks bad. I mean, when you have a straight drug out to the woodshed whooping like the 49ers did, you're gonna look like you can't compete in any level. Offensive line, defensive backs, linebackers, tight ends, running backs, like everywhere looks like an excuse me. Yeah, everywhere looks like an issue. Um I will say, the 49ers were still a 12-win team. They were still a team that beat a healthy Eagles team in the first round. Now, those Eagles have their issues schematically. I get that. They still have one of the best defensive minds in the league, and they had a very talented defense. So it's not like we can look at this team and say, okay, there's just literally holes everywhere. What you have is you have a lot of role players. I think that's what everybody looks at when you say we have holes everywhere. We have a lot of role players, no real standout blue chip players at some very specific positions. Obviously, in this game, you don't have your George Kittle, so you don't have a blue chip top tier receiving weapon at all. Christian McCaffrey's your guy. Like he is literally the offense as far as that because Ricky Pearsall could not be counted on, had the drops. Juwan Jennings, a couple huge drops in that game. Where Brock put the ball in the perfect location and Juwan just couldn't come down with it. Juwan is not a blue chip top tier wide receiver. He's a solid receiver, but he's a role player. He's a
And a fan
contested
favorite.
catch, red zone, third down guy. Like when the passing lanes get really congested and it's going to be a contested catch, that's your guy. Now he's not under contract for next year. I think he's going to want 15, 16 mil a year. I think he thinks he's like Mike Evans, but he's not. Um like he's probably going to outprice the 49ers or they will go let him see what the league thinks his value is. And I don't think it's going to be more than 15 mil a year. I just don't think it. Like he thinks he's going to get 20 somewhere. He's going to get 22. If somebody else wants to pay him that, sure. Fine. You know, we'll have to try and again restock the cupboard because outside of that, you don't have much. You have Ricky Pearsall, who looks really good when he's out there, but has had shoulder injury, knee injury, ankle injury. He's had the other knee injury, hamstring injury. Like, and he got shot. I get that, but he clearly, struggling, um, staying healthy. And this again, not to bring everything about to the training staff. Shanahan's comments about players just this tells you why their approach and he is not a doctor and he said that 100 times. He relies on the information that Dustin Perry gives him. Okay. Shanahan talked about Ricky Pearsall and preventing injuries, and he said he worked really hard at it this year. He put on some muscle, he added some bulk. That is what Dustin Perry believes that players need to do to prevent injury. We've seen this over and over again with players with the 49ers is over time they start to look like bodybuilders and they tell them you need to add bulk, you need to put on weight, this will help you prevent injury. They do that all the time and that's why you have so many soft tissue injuries. Nick Bosa looks like he's 40 pounds bigger than when he came into the league.
Yeah.
Okay, and then his ligaments are snapping. I'm just telling you, this is a problem. That the fundamental way that they go about this, they want guys to be big and heavy and able to absorb contact. Chukowski Tart, he said when he got to the Eagles, he said they allow us to be light and fast, and that keeps our bodies fresh. Just a systemic difference in approach. Anyways, so you have role players in the receiver room, you have role players in the tight end room right now when George Kittle's not there. Jake Tonjes has been a mostly solid receiving threat, is poor in run blocking. Luke Farrell was brought in to be a blocking tight end, and I don't understand what it is about any tight end not named George Kittle of why they have such a hard time blocking because Eric Saubert was terrible when he was here. He goes to the Seahawks and suddenly looks like the second coming of George Kittle in run blocking. I don't get that. Like I don't understand why that's the thing. But Luke Farrell was not nearly good enough in run blocking for what they paid for him this year. He was meant to come in and be that blocking tight end and was not good most of the year. Along the offensive, we'll get to the offensive line in a second. But you go to the defensive side, in the secondary, you have a lot of role players who show a lot of promise, but they were also greatly exposed with a lack of pass rush most of the season. Diamador Lenore had ups and downs. I'm not nearly as low on him as many people. He talks a lot, and I think that frustrates fans when he isn't able to back it up, or he gets burned, or he gets a penalty. Look, every corner is going to give up plays. Every corner is going to. He's not Patrick Surtain the second, right? But he's a very good corner in this league, and he can play really well. We need to get him some pass rush. Same with Renardo Green. Renardo Green's a very aggressive corner. He's a press man corner. He gets aggressive. That becomes an issue when you can't get a pass rush. Linebackers, we were decimated by injury all year. Again, this goes back to the training staff, but Dre Greenlaw or Drake Greenlaw. D. Winters is a role player in there. He's not the difference maker that Drake Greenlaw was. He's got the speed, but the trigger isn't quite there. The understanding of everything isn't quite there. Now, this was his first year starting, but he's going into a season this year where they've got to make a decision. Is he the guy they're going to invest in long term, or is he going to be a guy that fills that role this year and then moves on to free agency, kind of like Aziz Al-Shire, who's developed into one of the best linebackers in the league?
Yeah.
But I like D. Winters does not look like a future Aziz to me. He looks like a pretty good, like he would go somewhere and do well, but I just don't see, like, as far as right now. I think they're going to keep him on to prove it. They're not going to commit to him. Nick Martin just got through the concussion protocol almost 2 months after his concussion. He suffered on November 30th. I don't know what that means for his future. I'm more worried about him as a person than I am the third round pick. When you have a guy that's had a head injury that bad, they were still symptomatic 6-7 weeks afterwards, that's problematic. And I hope he's okay. I don't want to push anything there as far as he's got to get back on the field to show anything. Dude had a bad head injury, and that's one I don't blame on anybody. Fred Warner, he's going to be coming back, and everything, but they have a lot of role players there. They've got to get Mike Hill back. They've got to get Bosa back next year. So when I look at the defensive line, I still see though role players as far as Alfred Collins, C.J. West, Micah Williams. None of them showed the full blue chip, kind of top tier guy. Bryce Huff had flashes of that speed, but he's a very specific role. What this looks like going forward, we'll talk about a little bit. Offensive line, you have McKivitz, Pooney, Brendel. Those guys are just kind of guys. You have Trent Williams, who's been an absolute stud, and I think he still will be for several years to come. Like, dude shows no signs of slowing down. When he pulled his hammy against the Bears, he was still the fastest 49ers offensive lineman. That was like he beat Jake Brendel there, and Jake Brendel's supposed to be a quick offensive lineman, and he outweighs Brendel by like 50 pounds. So, like, dude is not slowing down. I don't think he's going to be retiring over the next couple of years. But the rest of the line is a question because Pooney looks like he's going through a sophomore. He went through a sophomore slump. Where does he go from here? Is he just physically limited, or was it a place that he kind of pulled the Ambry Thomas, where after your rookie year, there's all this praise, there's all these accolades. I've arrived, I've got this, and then you attack the offseason without the urgency of I need to go become an all pro. Like what Gray Zabel was this year, we were expecting Dominic Pooney to be, and it wasn't even close. Gray Zabel was one of the best interior offensive linemen in the league as a rookie from North Dakota State. Of course, he clearly it's still laughable to me that he wasn't the first guard off the board because the Cowboys picked Tyler Booker and Gray Zabel was sitting there, and Gray Zabel was like the second highest graded interior offensive lineman all season. He was clearly everybody saw it. Like everybody saw it. He just didn't have the projection measurables. But like, dude did not lose a rep at the Senior Bowl. I mean, to no one. And this was a defensive front that included the likes of like Walter Nolan and Mike Green and Shamar Stewart, guys who went in the first round, and he didn't lose to anybody. And that should have been a wake up call. But, anyways, with that, I think we can go through the offensive line and see where do the 49ers need to improve because the offensive line was terrible against the Seahawks. They got their rear ends handed to
So,
them.
question, Johnny, on that then, because someone had asked, and it might have been Callie, I can't remember, but the question was, and it was my question too, when Shanahan loves players more than we do, and we assess as fans that the center or the guard, whatever needs to go, how what does that look like when we sit here and say we got to find a center like Alex Mack, but then Shanahan says, "Oh, I like where we're at center." Then we're like, "Oh, okay, well, we're not going to
Not
replace the
only
center
does he
then."
say he likes where we're at center, he says that Jake Brennan's been one of the best centers in the league.
So
That's frustrating.
yeah. So what my question is, are we going off a realistic approach, or are we saying in a fantasy world where we know that we need to replace the center? Like, what's the take here? What are we doing?
I-
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating.
well, here's how I view center, especially with how the 49ers are. So Shanahan, what he really loves about a center is a very smart, headsy center who can identify things, who works hard in prep before the games. He is much more willing to take a physically limited guy and have a guy who is really smart about the scheme of everything that can direct the rest of the offensive line. Because here is the reality:
That is crucial. It is
is that
crucial.
very rarely, and you'll really notice this if anybody ever goes to try and scout centers at the collegiate level, it's extremely rare that you ever get a center one-on-one in any sort of situation, just a straight one-on-one. Like it's really rare. um like you can watch a game and you might see two reps that a defensive tackle has one-on-one with the center. Like most of the time, it's going to be against a linebacker. I'm talking about pass pro. So, like, if your center loses 25% of his pass pro reps as as a as an offensive play caller and an offensive line coach, you're okay with that because that means he's going to allow maybe one pressure every 2 games on average, like by what they tend to get. Now, where that does become a little bit of a problem is when defensive coordinators are going to look at that and they're going to look at third down specifically. And then they say, okay, now I and you're in the NFL, if you're going to say, I'm going to focus on trying to isolate that center as best I can. And you don't have stellar guard play in pass pro, that also exacerbates things because now they're running these stunts and they're attacking guys and they get favorable things and guys just get beat. I do believe that if you have better play from Pooney and you have better play from Spencer Burford, we're not nearly as angsty against Jake Brendel. The problem is that Jake Brendel is not moving people in the run game. He's handing out assignments really well, but he's not moving guys and he's not getting to the second level, you know, consistently enough for me. And so I look at it and I think I view center in this system kind of like how like the Dolphins have talked about quarterbacks. Their coach just came in and was talking about quarterbacks. And he said, you've got to invest in that position every single year. You draft a guy at quarterback every single year because if you hit on a guy, even if he's not going to replace your starter, you now have a very valuable asset that you can trade and gather other assets. Excuse me, didn't hit the cough button, but like I think in this system because of what you require from your center as far as so much scheme and directing guys, you draft a center every single year. I really think that's what they should do. You attack that position and you invest that position over and over and over again because somewhere along the way, sorry, I have a sinus infection. Uh, every somewhere along the way, you're going to hit on a guy who will be an upgrade to Jake Brendel. Like that's just I don't see how you can't. And you're investing in guys and giving them some time to learn behind the scenes, or they could be an upgrade at a guard position. All the interior offensive line positions have a lot of the same measurables there. So to me, invest in center every single year. There's a couple guys I've got my eye on that I'm going to be real interested in at the Senior Bowl, and I want to get down on the field and ask them about how have they handled have how much was on their plate to handle protections, um, run calls in the run game and wide zone stuff. I really want to get a hold of those two guys, and there's two guys on there that I want to see what they would do because there's a couple I think very very interesting center prospects, but I don't know if they're going to invest in it. I do wonder if they would invest to fill left guard and then look to potentially take over for Jake Brendel as they go forward. They've got to invest in the interior offensive line more though.
So I really like the idea of, and I saw what you were talking about with the Dolphins. They're talking about Tua, and he gave the the answer of like, well, we just don't know. We gotta ask too many questions, and we got a lot of work to do. And what you said about investing every year in players like defensive end, center, quarterback, like I love that. I don't know again how real, like, you can have a good idea. We could have 17 people in the chat all agree and say, "Yeah, that's great." Okay, that doesn't mean that that's what the Niners are going to do. What do you think the Niners are going to do? This is where you
I
pull
think,
out more of your hair, I guess, on this.
well, I don't see them investing a first into interior offensive line. They just don't value the positions that way. The closest we've ever gotten to it was Aaron Banks. He was a second round pick in interior offensive line. Um, they don't do big, big free agent acquisitions except for Weston Richburg. You know, which I don't know if they're gun shy, kind of like Javon Hargrave made them really gun shy about picking someone else because it didn't work out and it cost them so much cap. And then they have the Weston Richburg thing. Weston Richburg was the best center I think Kyle Shanahan has ever had. Now that's from my view, but as far as with the 49ers, Alex Mack in Atlanta was incredible. But the fact that you've had those two guys and then you're just okay with Jake Brendel just doesn't make sense to me. I would like to see them invest a first, but at 27 and the need you have at receiver. Now there are some guys that I think in the second or third round could be, interesting wide receiver prospects. It'll again this week of the Senior Bowl is going to be huge for that stuff. I'm going to be looking at wide receivers, going to be looking at a couple linebackers, going to be looking at offensive line, big time offensive line, because you're what it more is about is trying to figure out how do the 49ers shake this out, because they tend to value, if two guys are equal and they say, okay, we think both guys, are A plus players. That's our grade on them, A plus across the board in every metric in every way, based upon their prototypes. If one's a center and one's a wide receiver, they're going to pick the wide receiver just because they always wait towards guys who have the ball in their hands. Because, like Deebo Samuel, for example, on a tunnel screen can get you an 80-yard touchdown. Your center making a slightly better block on a reach block to getting you 5 more yards, that's not as valuable to them. Like, they see it, and I get it. Like you can have that, but it'll be interesting to see because you want to start seeing how do these different players shake out. If you have like a wide receiver who's pretty good, and you have an interior offensive lineman there who looks like a future All Pro, I think you take the guy the lineman in the first round. But that is generally, I want to see how these things shake out, how these guys look against the field, against other seniors. I don't have any 2025 college tape in, but I have started to go back and watch some of these prospects in their junior years, of how they played, to start getting some data on them.
So, question in the chat earlier about the Senior Bowl, Johnny. Are you meeting up with anyone like you have in the past?
The plan is to Steph's going to be down there. Wayne should be down
Okay.
there. I don't think Brad's going to be down there this year because he had the Western Richburg injury, tore his patellar tendon, so I don't think he's making the trek. I'm meeting up with Houston Stressens. He was on our preview episode. I did before we played Houston. We're gonna connect there at
Cool.
the Senior Bowl as well. Obviously the Texans are going to be deeply interested in lineman prospects as well. But the 49ers,
Maybe quarterback. Houston.
yeah, yeah, which again, this is why I
Ohio
don't get
State
into these.
quarterbacks ain't it, man.
This is why I don't get into the quarterback rankings junk during. This happens every year. Okay. I remember CJ Stroud's rookie year. People were sitting there saying, well, is Brock Purdy elite or is he not? In the middle of a season when he was in the running for MVP. And people, I don't know if Brock's elite. I don't know if Brock's elite. We know CJ Stroud is elite. We can clearly see CJ Stroud is elite. The same people who are wondering, is Brock asking, I just don't know if Brock's elite. We're saying clearly CJ Stroud's elite. And I say clearly you only saw some highlight throws that you went, wow, that's really fun to watch, and thought this is now a top tier quarterback in the league. And it's why I always say quarterback rankings always reveal more about the ranker than they do the quarterbacks themselves, because people will always put in there what they are wowed by or what they find really impressive more than anything. Where somebody puts Matt Stafford or Lamar Jackson will tell you what they value from a quarterback more.
100%.
So, anyways, yeah, they're going to be looking at offensive linemen. We're going to be doing that. It is just fascinating to think of that the 49ers have to address interior line in some way. I don't know if they go after Linderbaum. I would love, love, love them to go after Linderbaum in free agency because I think he would be such an upgrade. But I just don't know if they will because they don't have a left guard signed right now. And they're going to say, we're not kicking Brendel out the door because Brendel cannot play guard in this system. He does not have the length. And he doesn't have the anchoring size. So it's either Brendel or his replacement. Left, whatever you do at center, dedicated center, does not fix your whole left guard. And I think they're going to be in a place of let's not create another hole. Let's not spend money on something that doesn't plug a hole, and where we have a clear hole at left guard because Ben Barch is not signed, Spencer Burford is not signed. Ben Barch, you can't rely on being healthy. I learned that lesson this year.
Yeah.
I
No,
do
for
think
sure.
Connor McGovern is an interesting choice from the Bills because they have two guys that have played a lot of snaps for them at guard that are free agents this year. And they're coming up on they need to pay Osiris Torrance soon. So and that has been an offensive line that was a good run blocking offensive line. Their back got a lot of yards this last year. So that would be an interesting one to look at. And I think Connor McGovern would fit what the 49ers want to do. Which remember, Osiris Torrance was a guy I was pounding the drum for coming away from the Senior Bowl that year. Went in the third round of the Bills and has been a starter for them ever since. But I wonder about some of these center prospects. Will they take snaps at guard to show teams that they can do either? I don't know. So I'm really interested in this kid out of Florida, Drake Slaughter, or Jake Slaughter. Well, that's a great name for an offensive lineman, Slaughter.
I know,
Uh,
right?
so
Yeah. The
but
Patriots had one of
really want
those
to see
guys
him.
back in the
Yeah.
day, I think. I remember. And I was just seeing that name. All right. So let me ask you this. On your Twitter, or X, whatever you're calling it, yeah. Will you post a list of 5 players or so? Because I'm curious of
What I
who you're
usually
looking
do
for. Or what do you do?
so here's what I usually do. It is I try and film a lot of the reps and stuff because the team drills, you don't find a lot of those clips online. And so I try and get a lot of sorry, I'm always fiddling with something in my hands. I just held this up, something in my hand. Um Cayman's Islands in the chat now. He's coming in late. So I try
Oh,
to film a lot, but what I do is during warm-ups, um, I'll try and get some posts put up, just little thoughts about guys, and then in between the practice sessions, try and get some posts up about, you know, uh, quick summaries of some guys that stood out or things, and then we go over it that night in the live stream. um, this year, I'm going to be more intentional about interviews out on the field. Last year, I was kind of walking around like a lost puppy because I'd never gone down for any player interviews, and I don't even. And it's like a feeding frenzy down there. There'll be a player, and there's one guy from Georgia will have 15 people around him waiting to ask him 3 questions about who his favorite TikToker is. And I'm like, what is this junk? Um, and so this year I'm gonna be much more intentional. I got a quick interview there with Femi Oladejo last year. Still think that kid's gonna be phenomenal there with Robert Sala in Tennessee. Excited to see what Sala does with him next year. But and and so it's gonna be good. So yes,
so
Cayman's Island. I have a sinus infection. I have a sinus and ear infection. So it was a busy week. around here, but I'm on
It's
the
a
mend.
it's a timed recording. Yeah, Johnny's just mouthing the words. It's a pre-recorded. He's got his Jurassic Park coffee though. I think that's Jurassic
Godzilla!
Park. All right. So, quick update again. Remember, not a regular week for the Johnny Dell Football Academy podcast. Make sure you hit the notification bell. And because Johnny will be at the Senior Bowl meeting up with all of the friends of the faithful, lots of posts on X, I'm sure. Follow him there if you don't already. Also, a
I'm
reminder.
gonna add to my credentialing lanyards. I have another one
Nice.
somewhere,
Nice.
but yeah,
Well
I'll
done.
add to
Well
my
done.
credentialing lanyards.
Yeah.
Be good.
So excited to see. I'm always excited to see who you're looking at because I end up following their careers. I'll be honest, I still remember guys like Sidney Brown from the Eagles.
Yeah,
And when
who
they
probably is going to be their starter next year. I mean, they're most likely going to let Reed Blankenship go, and they're going to have Sydney there as their starting safety. There, he's been repping in and up. His ACL tear when he got that heading, at the end of his rookie year,
yeah,
really derailed everything because he spent that entire offseason and into the next season rehabbing that ACL. I think that they look at him as their replacement for Reed Blankenship.
yeah, and then maybe we get him. We talked about that last show. Um so but yes, the point
Well,
is,
so we need to jump to defensive line real quick. We spent a lot of time talking about offensive line.
yeah,
We're talking about the trenches here. So there's a couple guys that one, the kid from Miami, Bain, is going to be at the Senior Bowl, which is going to be fascinating because he's seen as kind of a consensus guy as near the very top of the draft boards. That'll be interesting to see. Mainly, if anything, he's going to be a great test for tackles, guards, centers, anybody in pass, any offensive lineman in pass protection in the one-on-ones because they put everybody against everybody. And so you'll be able to see him. That's the thing I'm most excited about. That kid is chasing the number one overall pick. Like but he's not going number one overall because the Raiders need a quarterback and they're getting Fernando Mendoza and everybody knows it. But um, he's going to be there. So the question is, where does he fall in here? He's chasing a top three selection. Um, but he's going to be a great test for everybody else. But defensive line, I do wonder, do we, they're Jordan Elliott and Kalia Davis are free agents this year. I don't know if I don't think they're going to bring Jordan Elliott back. They may be, but I'll be surprised. I felt he was our fourth best defensive tackle. And especially projecting into next year, Jordan Elliott has reached his ceiling. Like there is no, this guy's going to get better next year. Still struggles against duo runs. CJ West was everything you wanted Jordan Elliott to be as far as a guy who could hold up against double teams and everything. He just had to learn the NFL game. And that was showing near the end of the season. CJ West, I get it. He got a bad PFF grade. I don't give two craps about the PFF grade. CJ West was our at worst second best defensive lineman. Like I don't know what they were watching, but um the way that the 49ers defense with Kasurik wants them to play, CJ West has a very bright future. Um so like they're gonna need to address defensive tackle. And so it'd be interesting to see who's there and what they can bring. There's some guys that I remember from the film last year that I'm going to be interested, watching them from juniors to now seniors, seeing what kind of growth they made. But um, you know, those two guys, CG West, Alfred Collins, they're definitely your future at defensive tackle. Now the problem is you have both of them stacked in the same draft class. So if they both ascend really quickly, you're going to need to quickly find a replacement for one of them because you're not signing both of them long term. So like it's crazy to think about that after their rookie year, but that you need to start future projecting to stagger when these contracts come out because what you don't want is like what different teams have had happen is you get a really good draft class, then all of a sudden you got to pay everybody at the same time, and you end up with void bombs like the Eagles have. Like they're coming up with these void bombs because they had some really good draft classes. But going to watch interior defensive line. The 49ers, I think, are going to pick somebody in the mid rounds. So we're going to get a good eye on that. I do wonder, what the future is with Bryce Huff. I don't know if he fits long term into their plans or not. When he's on the field with Bosa and Michael, difference maker. Like the speed he brings off the edge. We talked about that. Nobody wins at the 7 yard depth mark like Bryce Huff. But when that is not there, asking him to do anything else is what he is not good at. And that's why the Eagles moved on from him. Is that if you and that's what we talked about after we traded for him. I said he's a one-trick pony, but has an incredible one trick. It is one of the best in the league. But if you ask him to do anything outside that one trick, so he's a role player. Do you start looking for another end that can be a rush guy and that you can have as a rotational guy in at end in it as far as base downs? I wonder if they look for a two-trick pony there. That somebody you can maybe grab in the third round. I don't know. We'll see.
So Cayman's checked in with a super chat, was asking Proctor or Freeling at number 27.
It's too early to tell for me. Like at this time of year, just coming off of the season and just like I've been working through just taking stock of what we have. I'm just now getting into the college stuff. Like I literally this morning downloaded I think 30 games to watch. So I've got a backlog of like 30 games to watch, and that's just from the 2024 season. Then we're gonna get into the Senior Bowl. Then I'm gonna get into the 2025 film. Really, I usually come off the Senior Bowl because I know Cayman, you hopped on midway or early in the season after we met, which is fantastic. Great supporter of the show. Um, Normally, what I do is go into the Senior Bowl mostly with a clean slate because I haven't had any time to scout a lot of these guys, and so for me, I'm not coming in mostly with any sort of preconceived notions about any of these players. I get there and I mostly unaware of the buzz around guys, except for a guy like Bain, who literally everybody's talking about. Um, so for me, when I saw Gray Zabel there, I had not heard the buzz that people were talking about him as a potential first round pick. It was just obvious from being there. I was like, this dude's going to be a first round pick. Femi Oladejo had no buzz coming into the Senior Bowl. Everybody was buzzed, like, well, not everybody. There was a lot of buzz about him coming out of the Senior Bowl because he just walked out on the field, and when you say pass the eye test, like fit the prototypical body of a top tier edge player. And people said I was crazy coming away from the Senior Bowl. I said that kid's going to go in the second round. Just watching him in the drills, watching his energy, talking to him, and he went in the second round to Tennessee. Um, so like I always go to the Senior Bowl, and that's where I've had some whiffs on guys. Had some that nailed it right around where they would go, like Jamari Caldwell last year. I was real high on Jamari. He played really well with that really good Chargers defense this last year. Was about the exact kind of player that you'd expect him to be. Osiris Torrance was a kid that I was real high on. He came out and he like I've already talked about him. That there's been a number of players over the years that you look at and you say, okay, this guy is going to be good. Dominic Puni was one of those, came out of the Senior Bowl, and in the mock drafts, I kept mocking him to the 49ers in the fourth round because I was like, you just can't pass him up at that range. And then he goes to the 49ers and he's been a 2-year starter now. He's got to improve. He had a sophomore slump this year. He's got to get better. So it's way too early for me to really be projecting what's going to be there at 27. I usually don't start my mock drafts
But
until
stay
like
tuned.
yeah, we usually start in like April is when we start the mock drafts because the next month is going to be all about prospects and just introducing everybody to prospects, guys that I'm really getting really excited about and watching their tape. We went through a lot of guys. Jaden Higgins was a kid, came away from the Senior Bowl, was so high on that kid there and said this we went over his tape on the show. Kid went in the second round and was really Houston's number 2 wide receiver. Struggled getting some things down early in the year, but by the end of the year, everyone saw exactly why he was the second round pick. That he looked really promising. You look at this is again where they've got to have questions about CJ Stroud. When you think about pairing him with Nico Collins, there's no excuse for not having an extremely explosive passing attack. They got a lot of weapons there in Houston. So we're going to dive into all of it, and we'll look at prospects. We'll go sometimes positionally, sometimes just where I'm kind of working through the tape and seeing where guys are at, guys that I'm just really interested in looking at, because it's usually about 20 hours of film study will go into one of these podcasts. Whereas during the season, these shows become the less prep needed because we have fresh storylines, we have fresh things to talk about. These ones during the off season become extremely labor intensive because there's usually about 20 hours of film work that I put in just for a Monday and Friday show. And so, but it's interesting. It's always fun to dive into the college kids and see what's out there.
Yep, I get a front row seat. I love it. Let's get you out of here on this, Johnny. Wish list for defensive coordinator. Raheem was in the chat as a name. What do you see?
So, I mean, obviously, there's the ties there with Kyle Shanahan, with Raheem Morris for a long time. They're good friends. They like each other. Those are always important things when guys are working with each other. There's
Mhm.
also a lot of respect as far as their understanding of the X's and O's. I will be very, very surprised if Raheem Morris is not at least brought in, because they've got to interview a minority candidate no matter what. So if Kyle's going to interview one, I think he's going to interview Raheem. It's either that or he's going to put maybe KJ Wright through the interview process to to prep him either for the future, where he wants him to think about as going as a coach to maybe move into that role. I can see it going one of those ways. Raheem Morris, he's a multi-front guy, and the 49ers really last year with Saleh, they seemed more open to multi-fronts. Like it wasn't just straight wide nine every time. We ran a lot of 5-man surface fronts. People always talk about the wide nine and all this stuff. We ran a lot more 5-man fronts, trying to use Luke Gifford kind of in that KJ Wright role, that he played there with Seattle. So I don't think the front is necessarily would be a scheme problem there with Raheem. I do think here's where I get frustrated again with the beat reporters. So one of them who I don't know. I don't want to toss the guy under the bus. He's not a bad beat reporter, so he's not the one that shall not be named. But still talking, and I saw him talking yesterday about how they're going to keep Gus Bradley because he runs the Seattle system. I'm like, the 49ers have not run the Seattle system is in 6 years. So why are we still talking about that? The reason they brought D'Amico in to replace Saleh wasn't because D'Amico was trained in the Seattle system. He was trained in Saleh's system, which had started out with the fundamentals of the Seattle system and then moved to a wide 9 quarters defense. 2019 was a huge shift schematically with this team. So like they went from very much single high presentation every time, 4 and 5-man surface along the linebackers, to where they said we're going wide 9, we're going 3 identical linebackers instead of a very specific prototype player type for Sam, and then Mike and Will being more similar. To now they said all 3 have the same player profile. We're going wide 9, and now we're playing split safety presentation, 1 yard outside the tackles from our safeties most of the 90% of the time. That was a very big scheme departure setup, and it really moved more into Saban cover 7, Fangio cover 6, cover 8, kind of checks system, and then brought in a lot of and this is where D'Amico, I think, had a hand in that, is brought in a lot of Mike Zimmer front looks and presentations with the front and the linebackers, because D'Amico played under Mike Zimmer. It really became this amalgamation of a bunch of different systems, and an example would be, in 2017, 2018, when we ran split field coverages, meaning you have man on one side and you have zone on the other. We were running the old Saban's Pete Carroll cover three Mabel, which is man on the backside on the two weak side, and then it's cover three with a matching zone on the other side. We didn't run cover three Mabel nearly as much in 2019. We still ran it some. By 2020, 2021, it was even less. 23, 24, 25 is completely disappeared. Very few teams, by the way, run Mabel much anymore. Everybody started to go to either cover three Buzz or cover four Tricks, which Buzz is more of that Zimmer Fangio kind of influence. And there is some Pete Carroll in there, but which is that Sala influence. When it gets to cover four, we ran a lot more cover four Tricks, which is man to the backside, cover four to the strong side. And that's a Fangio thing. Fangio has been running that for like 15 years. And that started to really move throughout the league. And we started running that more. We really introduced that more under Steve Wilkes, actually. And it's been in the arsenal since. So, like, this idea we're just keeping Gus Bradley to keep that Seattle cover three system, it's not accurate. And I don't want. And Kyle talked about that in the after presser, and the guys are still writing about this. That's why Gus Bradley's brought in. I don't think Gus Bradley was brought in to run Pete Carroll's Seattle three system, which was mainly Rip Liz, cover three Mabel, and then a three Palms, which is a different sort of animal that had to do with divider rules and all this stuff that was from Pete Carroll mixing some Nick Saban stuff in there. So, like, I think Gus Bradley was brought in, one, as insurance because you needed somebody who you knew was a good teacher. That's the biggest thing that these defensive coordinators have to do, is that they have to understand and be able to teach these systems in sequence in a way that the players can understand. I know this first, and then I can apply that to this, and then bring in this on that, and then I apply these things from that. And so it works down in a very cohesive scheme where players can understand everything. And that's where Vic Fangio is the best at it, because he teaches everything in packages and everything ties down, and so the players are never overwhelmed with, okay, the way I play cover two is completely different than the way I play my cover three, and like there's always a portion of things that tie into other stuff. So I think Gus Bradley was brought in, one, so that he could absorb all of that was in there, see how Robert Saleh taught all of that. He has to also teach it, because sometimes you learn best by teaching. And then he was the one drawing up all of their red zone defenses. So, like, Gus Bradley has the inside track simply because now you understand that the entire system, you believe that he can run Saleh's system. The biggest mistake that Kyle Shanahan said that he made with Steve Wilkes is assuming that in an offseason on his own, that Steve Wilkes was going to be able to come in and do what his dad did when he came to the 49ers, which was lock himself in a Marriott hotel for 2 months, watching every last minute of detailed notes on the install tapes of Bill Walsh and Mike Holmgren, learning the West Coast system, and then being able to run it as well or better than those guys did. He says that was unfair to Steve. I thought, what Mike or what Kyle was figured out was not everybody can do what my dad did, and that's not a slide on them. I think he just started to realize how impressive it was what his dad did. This was a realization that if I bring somebody in early and they are with the team and with the meetings and in the meetings the entire time, that is much easier for them. And when they have a basis out of some of these principles first, then they're able to learn everything in there. So that's why Gus Bradley has the inside track. Is not just he's from the Seattle tree. It's that you know who he is as a person. You know what he can do as far as running a staff, and you've had him there to learn the entirety of it before Saleh left. So that is why Gus Bradley has the inside track. And now they are going to talk to Raheem Morris. I'm interested in that. I think Jim Schwartz, that's going to be a situation they keep a really close eye on, because I wouldn't be opposed to seeing if the Browns would send him over here for a third or fourth round pick. Just saying, because I think Jim Schwartz would be a huge fish to catch. I'm not sure he's going to get another head coaching. Of course, Gus Bradley could be that guy, but Gus Bradley, his defenses the last number of years hasn't exactly wowed anybody. There's a reason why he was available. So I don't know. It's and I don't know if you need Gus to do a better job than Saleh did. You need Gus to be able to run the system as well as Saleh did and teach it. But you really need your blue chip players back on defense. That defense at the beginning of the year was night and day from the end of the season. And it's just going to be that way. Because you need Micah Williams there, you need Nick Bosa there, you need Fred Warner there, and they've got to build in through the draft. I'm not as nervous Nelly about Gus Bradley as I think everybody else. Because again, I'm looking at it beyond just, well, this is what his defenses were before, over these last number of years. And he's only brought in for this, and it's going to be stale, and it's going to. I don't know. I don't that I'm not sold on that just because I'm looking at it from. I really think Gus was brought in. One is the insurance policy, but so that he could be here and learn everything about what changes to that Seattle system were made by Saleh, and that know that system in and out, and then be able to teach it, because that was the biggest mistake they made with Wilkes, is bringing somebody in who didn't run that system before, trying to keep scheme continuity, and asking somebody else to learn their system from the outside looking in during the offseason. That was, I think Kyle looked at that and said, never again will I ask anybody to do that. That's why they went with Nick Sorensen the next year. And it was not good because Nick was not ready. I don't know if he ever will be ready, but that was a case where they were clearly trying to do that. Of we didn't have somebody who understood every last detail and nomenclature that we use here. We need that, and it was unfair to ask somebody to do that in an offseason. So if I'm going to keep this scheme, I've got to keep guys. It's got to be an internal promotion somehow. So I think that's where it is.
We'll see. In the next few days, there might be some rumblings. I mean, who knows? This stuff could go on at any point. Um, Stay tuned. Again, hit the notification bell. Especially, like I said, for this coming week is just going to be a different ball game. No show Monday morning. Johnny and I will try to go later in the evening. So just you're never going to know exactly with this week with the Senior Bowl, but it's going to be good info. Good info. Going to be a fun show. We'll get updates from Steph and just the fun
Usually
hangouts that you guys
our
get.
go times will be based upon how quickly I get out of a dinner with those folks. So
Yeah. Yep. So
we
always
can sit around
fun.
and talk
Get
for
some
a few
stories.
hours, I'll just say.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Very cool. All right. So in the meantime, in between time, stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, go Niners.